fourth Education Upended, and this is going to be recorded. Thank you, Jenna. And thank you to Jenna and Allison for helping me behind the scenes. And thank you to Steph for taking our visual notes. Thank you, thank you. Those will be wonderful. And I appreciate all of you joining us as we talk about where we want to go in the future. So my plan for today is to really do a short little recap on where we've been over the last 3 weeks, and to spend most of today dreaming with our eyes wide open. That's what I titled our theme for today. Like, where do we want to go based on kind of some of the experiences we've had? And let's use our breakout time to brainstorm and to help each other plan for some practical ways to make that happen. So those are kind of the 2 steps that I imagine in our breakouts. So from my perspective, and I would love to hear if I'm missing anything, you can just put it in the chat. Over the last 3 weeks, you know, the first week, we spent kind of introducing this topic of the optimism, the bright spots, what we might be able to learn from this as we move forward. How do we help people plan for the fall? How do we start thinking about that now? What have been some benefits? And we talked about regulation and relationship and connections as kind of our big emphasis, what we really want to see going forward. That's what really came out for me. It was really a focus on this regulation strategies and relationships. And so the next week, we did some regulation stuff. Emily brought out the information on the polyvagal very quickly. And we talked about ways that people regulate themselves, and how we might help students regulate, how we might communicate those ideas to parents. This kind of idea about physical regulation and helping us stay calm and healthy and resilient. And then last week, what really came out of those first 2 weeks was a desire to talk about families. How do we connect with families? What's been our challenges in connecting with families? What have been the really good parts about this new way of connecting with families? Because I did hear a lot of educators and school support folks talk about how there have been some instances where they actually have stronger connections with families now that they've had to try a lot of different ways. And you guys shared really great strategies with each other around things that have been working for you in trying to reach families in creative ways through texting and Zoom and phone calls and Google Meet and all these really great ideas that were shared. So I don't know if anyone feels like I'm missing anything there, but for me, that is the big recap of the last few weeks. So I'm going to share first reminders of visual appreciation, right? Remember, like, thumbs up, jazz hands, like hang loose. Like when you hear somebody, you know, really resonate with what you're saying, or you want to let them know that you agree, that's been really helpful. We've been using that even in our ACES Connection meetings lately as a tool. And I want to first, let's see, share my screen with the first slide. Okay, I'm going to go to present. Hold on. Okay, so there's kind of the summary that I went over with you. And I think for our first breakout, I would like to put us in groups of, what did we say, Jenna? Probably, how do we have it set? 5?
Yes, 5.
Okay, so groups of 5, and take about 6 minutes, and Jenna will time it. So based on your experiences over the past 6 weeks, and we're going to pause together before we get into the breakout. Pause and think about 1 or 2 things that you hope, dream, wish to bring forward into the future of school. So I would like you to take a moment right now and write that down, or just, you know, think. We're going to pause for about 30 seconds and kind of gather what that might be for you. And then I'll give Jenna the go ahead to put us into our breakout rooms. So kindly pause and think about what those 1 or 2 things might be for you. Okay, so let's dive into our breakouts. Jenna, if you'll set us in there, and let's discuss with our group round robin what our thoughts are. And these are right now just your dreams. Don't worry about how to make it happen. That's step 2. These are just what would you, 1 or 2 things that are the most important for you to focus on.
Team, and we've been talking a lot about just really acknowledging, well, for us, because we're not going back until August, so we've been kind of acknowledging the grief, the even on the smaller scale that might be small to an adult but not to a student, like for example, the transitions, like elementary to middle, those kids not being able to see anyone again, middle to high school, and then the seniors, of course, not having a graduation, a prom, that kind of a thing. So just those kind of losses. Because for us, like, a lot of those kids aren't going to see their teacher again. And so the importance of checking in, like I was encouraging teachers, if there's any way to have a virtual closure, like a lot of our kids, I feel like they're going to need some kind of a closure, even if it's a Zoom meeting, just to say goodbye to everybody, something like that. So that's what we were focusing on today.
Okay. Yeah, because the teachers are communicating with the students up here.
I see. Yeah. So your kids, how long were they out?
Since March 13th was our first day of quarantine, I guess you can say. Mm-hmm. So that's when, like, even the university actually shut down, just to like get a sense of what's going on. And the universities don't close, you know that, right? So March 13th. And there's a choice, like you can go to class in Quebec in the daycare elementary, or you can choose to continue learning from home. So the teachers are organizing the desks 2 meters. They're organizing, the students' stuff. So who's staying, who's going. There's limited, people I mean, hell, I'll go to school just so that I can see my friends, you know?
Yeah, I think
But
it would
it's
be
the
awesome
parents'
if
decision.
it would be so nice if the teachers could prepare the kids somehow, like with social stories or something to prepare them of what it's going to look like whatever the precautions, like if the students have to wear masks or if they have to be certain feet apart, like through social stories or some things like that.
Yeah. Vanessa, you were going to say something? Sorry. And I was just
I was
finishing
just
a
gonna
thought.
say, so you said it's elementary and then like the early childcare is going back? Okay.
Yeah, which is weird because they're the ones who are least disciplined because they're their authentic selves, right?
Yeah,
They don't know any better, right?
Yeah.
So,
Well, I was just thinking it's at that age, it's gonna be more about whether their parents and caregivers want them to go back. If it's optional, than it is,
exactly.
their own will, and also whether their parents have to work. I mean, so be interesting to see how
Well,
many.
the parents aren't working right now, or they're working from home.
Right.
Yeah, so I'm just trying to think what would be cool. Jenna, did you have any like input?
No,
Since you're
I'm
here
not an
with
educator,
us?
so I don't really have much to add, unfortunately. But it's just really interesting to hear it from all of your perspectives.
What are your thoughts on how to support the staff?
And the
'Cause
teach-
it sounds like they're going to be really nervous.
Yeah,
Yeah, they
the
are
teachers
definitely
are worried, which
very nervous.
what I was
Yeah.
going to say. Yeah, like my friend has asthma and she's 51 years old, and she's going to be wearing a visor and she's going to be wearing a mask and she's going to be like really like being mindful of her space even with colleagues, because she's noticing that her colleagues aren't adhering to the 2-meter distance rules and they're not protecting themselves, they're not protecting others. So it's really weird how some teachers are thinking one way and other teachers are thinking another way. There's no guidelines, there's no strict, it's like flying a plane. They're going with the flow, and there's different personality styles as well and dynamics, and the kids are going to fight, and they're going to push each other like we did when we were kids.
Mm-hmm. I know. I think the breakout sessions are about to end, but maybe that would be a good question at the end to see what other teachers are planning on to do.
Yeah, the teachers are worried. They're nervous. So we're hoping that we don't go back to school Monday.
And thank you, Jen. I think that was perfect amount of time. We'll kind of get a sense from everyone else. And I think someone said they got jumped back in before they could finish their thought. I think it will take us back to the same group when we return again. So we'll have a chance to, and I think the next one might be a tiny bit longer because we'll see see what we need. So trying to find that balance between like enough time, not enough time. I don't want to rush people, but I also don't want people to just feel like they're stuck in the space. So you guys can definitely give me some feedback on that, on how that timing felt because I want to use these every week for sure. Whoops, I didn't mean to do that. All right, so I think everyone's back. Please, okay, needed a few more minutes. Great. The next one will make a little bit longer. And my fault, what I forgot to say, and our group did this, but I hope yours did too. And if not, do it when you come back. We introduced ourselves when we got in our small groups, and I forgot to say that reminder when we got together, right? When we went to the breakouts, like, please introduce yourselves to each other, say hi, let people know what you do. and then dive in. So if you didn't do that when we go back together, please do that. And I apologize for not reminding the group. So I'll just launch with kind of the 3 big points that came up in our group, and then I would love for you guys to join in. If you'd be willing to, talk out loud to the group, that's great. If not, in the chat, and let us know what you guys talked about. So what really came up for our group was needing to be able to regulate ourselves. So understanding regulation techniques, some of the things that we've talked about, over the last 2 weeks or 3 weeks in terms of regulating our own nervous systems as we go back to try to support families and students in this transition. And that we often feel so invested in our service to others that we forget about how to regulate ourselves. And approaching the year, however it starts off, with a ton of compassion and awareness for what we've all been through. The grief, the stress, the upside downness of our world, that when we can't just jump back in, we can't just be like, okay, off we go, we're back, that we have to figure out a way to pause and at least acknowledge, the very least, acknowledge what we've all been through collectively, and hopefully be able to spend time processing that effectively as a group as well. And that, because I can't overemphasize how important that process time is. And then also, how do we meet needs of, we had a Head Start person in our group. So like when we talk about really little kids and their families, how can we try to step them in slowly from, in small groups, if we can, but how do we think about how to slow it? Again, it's sort of that slowing down and going slow and starting small. And so how do we think about that as we go forward? I would love to hear what some of the other groups came up with. Anyone want to share? Susan, can you unmute yourself? Jenna might have to do it for you. There you go.
Yeah, I think we got it. Teamwork. We talked a lot about, there's a couple of things, but the big thing was really connections. We talked about connections and then providing space for allowing, I think the other thing was, Kenya actually said this, providing space for allowing people to share their story, I think is the way I might be able to correct that, but I understood it as, allowing people to have space to say, this happened to me and I was a victim. And so, hearing the voice of those that are challenged, I think those two.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I really love that. That resonates. I see a lot of head nodding. We get some jazz hands up there, some thumbs. Yes, like I see a lot of.
You said it better, but thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Anyone else want to share from their group? I can't always see everybody at once, so you can always put in the chat like I want to share too, because I can't see everybody at one time. Anyone?
Adriana, did you want to share? I saw you had your hand raised.
Thank you. Jenna.
Hello. Right.
Hi.
Hi, you're there. Okay, I was just going to share about our group, but somebody else did. But there is what you were talking about, transitioning, getting into the schools when school starts up. In New Zealand, we've actually started that in a small way with some children going to school. And what one parent said to me was that their children felt really uncomfortable going into the school when they had to be, it was so regimental. And so she said to me that should rather have, if schools opened, to open so that children could be children, and that they could play on the playgrounds, and they could do the normal things, and they didn't have to line up in a regimental way and maintain that 2 meter distance, because she said it caused them a little bit of stress in that situation, because they couldn't quite understand why they couldn't mix and mingle. So that transition time is really good, but also what that parent was saying was that if we're in, we're in, and if we can't be in, then don't, just consider that. How are you going to explain it to the children so that they don't get fearful from the regimental business of distancing and not playing with certain toys and not playing? Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that's really great to hear, especially because you guys have started the process. That's good for us to hear that kind of feedback as we move forward. I really appreciate that, for sure. Anyone else? These are great, so don't be shy. You can even, if you don't want to talk, just chat it in there and we'll say it for you. Because we're learning from each other. Sally. Okay, go for it. And then Charisse. Awesome. Okay. Oops, hold on, Sally, you got unmuted. You got muted. Can we unmute? Jenna, can you help?
Yes, I unmuted her.
Oh, there we go.
Okay.
Okay. There you go.
Sorry,
Hi.
I was trying to look at something. No, I've really been thinking about that a lot. I mean, developmentally, if we open schools with some kind of physical distancing going on, particularly with even K through 8, I think that's asking them to be together in ways that are probably frightening, anxiety producing, and really weird. But yeah, what's our option? I mean, do we wait 2 years for a vaccine? I mean, I don't know.
Excellent. So that's something for us to really think about as we brainstorm together again. Thank you. All right, Charisse. Can you unmute yourself? Let's see where else we can do it for you. All right, there you go. Go for it.
First of all, thank you for pronouncing my name correctly. No one ever does that. So it's awesome. I think what we talked about is just recognizing the inequity and disparities for each of the children in our own districts, and then how are they going to then be reintegrated into a school where they may be behind in terms of their peers. Like, if you have, both parents at home, you have access to multiple computers. I mean, like we do, we're very fortunate. My husband has his home computer, or his computer from work. I have my own office. My daughter has her own laptop. But she still has struggles because she has ADHD, she has an IEP. And so when our kids go back into the school, are we going to give them the space to tell their story? Because all kids are affected so differently depending on, trauma and educationally. How were they doing before this, and now how they're doing? And it frightens me that we are not prepared to handle the onslaught of mental and emotional things that are going to come out once the kids are back in the school and back to the quote unquote normal. And so I don't know, I'm really worried. As a youth mentor professional, I get to talk to my kids twice a week, and there's some of them are so clueless as to like how they're really impacted, because it's like, oh, it's great, blah, 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 but like not even really processing the deeper stuff. So I'm just hoping that we can help them to reintegrate and be successful.
Yes, such great. And I keep hearing this thread of sharing their stories, giving them space, slowing down. I love that. I love that a lot. Thank you. Adrian, increase peer support groups. Do you want to say that to the group? Where are you? Oh, there you are. Are you okay with that? Yeah, great.
Sure. Sometimes it helps me to write down first before I speak.
I hear you.
To use. But yeah, our group was talking a lot about connection, as was stated earlier, and just love the idea of increasing, training for facilitating peer support groups, to provide, that safe and healing space, like we talked about, kind of how do we increase connection with diverse groups. And we have now this virtual platform that actually Susan was talking about, the connection between diverse groups and rural families. I think, through this virtual, if we have virtual peer support groups like we're doing now, right, we are connecting from all over the world, and sharing ideas and providing, we're creating our own safe and healing spaces. So how do we use this model with our parents in schools and maybe some of the older youth? But yeah, I think just being very intentional about, sorry, there's background noise. The kind of, anyway, just how to facilitate and maybe increasing training around that would be great. Thank you.
Great. Oh, thank you. I love that. Yeah, I see. It's like a lot of like head nodding and jazz hands and, peers. I love the peer support that works so well, and setting up peer support amongst adults. A lot of the work that I've done in the past with schools as a consultant has been around, spending a good year just teaching the adults how to collaborate effectively and trust each other first before we can really dive into the kids, right? So it's just so much deep work on building adult relationships and getting them to be able to rely on each other and support each other in this way, with a lot of openness and trust before we can create real manageable change in a building. And so sometimes it takes a long time to get that aha, that because it's so deep, and it's like how we do this work is more important than what we're doing. How we do it, we could be talking about any subject, but how we go about doing this with adults and with kids, that process part is really the focus of the work. And so I love, and you guys are giving some really excellent tangible strategies on things that we can think about and do, and breaking down those, like Adriana said, breaking down those silos. Anyone else who hasn't shared would like to share? Kenya. Let's see. All right, there you go. Oh. I'll unmute you. See if this works. Jenna, help us out. There we go. Hi.
Hi, everybody. So I think one of the things that we're kind of focused here in our county is just kind of the stigma that's going to come with this when kids get back into school. Because kids going for reactions. So, you're going to have time where a kid might sneeze and they're going to get ostracized or looked at differently because, coronavirus, and everybody's going to assume. And so we're trying to figure out, how do we prevent children from looking at each other a different way, how change their interactions to where it's not negative, just because now there's this new stigma attached with being sick. Like we project that bullying is going to increase, and it's going to be hard. And how do we educate our kids in schools to appropriately handle these situations where all this anxiety is happening, and you're hearing so much from social media and you're hearing the news, and there's like nobody is on a consensus of what's happening. And so how do we manage that in schools when schools do open back up? Because this is going to happen. Like, it's inevitable, and it's just, how do we get ahead of that so we're not trying to, catch up for all the things we didn't work on?
Great, so, thank you. All right, before we dive back into our second breakout, is there anyone else who wants to share something that they wrote down before we broke out, or within their groups, of like something we have to think about bringing forward when we start? Oh, Therese. Let's see. Okay, I think I unmuted you. There we go.
Yeah, actually, I didn't share this, but I wanted to. So last night, my daughter saw the video of the young African-American man who was jogging and was killed. And we live in a predominantly white college town. She's also biracial. So my husband is biracial, and then I'm Black. And so even how she processes all that is so different from me. but it's frustrating for me because I work with the school district. So I'm, trying to give her the space to vent and to be open about what she feels, but also explain to her, like, how you present yourself to the world is the difference between people hearing you and people shutting you down. But it's so hard to navigate. And I just feel like her school in particular, they don't do a great job at bringing in diversity. Like, there's absolutely no African-American teachers in our district, period. There's a janitor and then there's a football coach, but that's it for African-American staff. And so, when I'm trying to explain to her how to navigate the small town that we live in and how to talk to her friends, who some of them are white, and like, it's just hard. And I don't feel like we have enough of those conversations because, not only is coronavirus affecting us all, but we're now hearing that in certain communities, it's unproportioned.
Right.
Or disproportioned. So I just, that was one of the things I wanted to discuss, because I just feel like, I'm in a unique position where I work with the district. I'm African-American, but I also don't want to be the only one raising Cain. And how do I then have allies to say, yes, this is a real thing. Like, how do we discuss this? So that was definitely something that's freshly on my heart, as I just had a conversation with her before I jumped on the call. So
I love that. Thank you for sharing that. And I think that's a great, yes, jazz hands, like thumbs up, is for us to think about our own roles in how we can be allies and not, and in bringing forth those conversations and having uncomfortable conversations and having the brave conversations and really bringing up, what's happening with people that are from Asian descent, what are happening in disproportionately poor communities of, Black, same in Los Angeles, like Black and brown communities are definitely feeling this harder. And so being able to discuss that age appropriately, really not being afraid to dive in, especially with older kids. And we've been having these conversations with our own kids. So how can we bring that forward into the fall? I really love that. Thank you for prompting that question. Let's see. Okay, any other big hands before we dive in? Peggy. All right, last one, and then we'll go to breakouts. All right, Peggy, go for it.
Okay.
All right.
So one of the things I because I work pre-K-12, I get to see the wide variety throughout my day. But I think it's really important that we look at the needs across those grade levels, because the needs for the preschooler are going to be different from the student who's about to be a senior next year. And so how do we be cognizant of that? How do we take the time to really look at what those needs are going to look like September 1, but also December 20th? Because we're going to really need to look at that teenager may come in okay in September, but maybe a hot mess in December before they're going to be home for a long break. And what is that long break going to do? And is it going to feel like Corona all over again?
Right.
And so we just need to think about that process.
Yeah, I love that. Yes, thank you. Developmentally across the spectrum, thinking about, we talk about trauma-informed approaches and the neurosequential model. We do talk about developmental, stages of trauma and how, trauma is for a 5-year-old and how trauma is for a 15-year-old are very different. And what you see out of them in terms of reaction are also very different. So that's really important to understand that developmental span of behaviors that we might see and how we can be prepared for that. Thank you. All right, so okay, Sally, real quick, and then we'll dive in.
I guess one of the things I'm thinking about is structurally, I hope that there's time before fall, at least for people in the US, to talk about all these things with the administrators, because if that doesn't happen, I don't know how anything's going to work. We can't just go back and have one day of, in our August, whatever that is, coming back together and figuring this all out. That's all I want to say. Sorry, because I know.
No, that was perfect. That was the perfect segue, because I've been having a discussion on Twitter with some friends, and this has been very much on my mind lately about the balance of power. And I'm a dreamer, I'm a disruptor, I have all these big ideas about how school should be done, right? And I know I have a lot of teacher friends out there who agree with me. And the conversation has been around, what do we do? And so that's what I want us to focus on in the breakout. So can it all be driven bottom up from within your classroom? Can you be, we all know teachers who are individual disruptors in their classrooms, right? They have been forever. How do we and we have some leaders that are courageous, disruptive leaders too, right? And so how do we bring that together? How do we both bring power and change and disruption up from the bottom to do these things that we hope for? And how do we bring leaders along and share this with administration and superintendents? And do we have a opportunity window right now, because there's sort of this empathy window, right, where people are feeling what we're feeling and maybe more willing to hear what we have to say. And this is exactly what I want you guys to talk about in your groups. So having shared all of those hopes and dreams that we have, and even the ones that we didn't say out loud, so first, if you didn't introduce yourselves to each other, do so. And then really dive into how can we do these things? What are some really specific strategies? I'm talking specific. Are we going to schedule a phone call with our admin? What are we going to do to try to move this forward, these wonderful ideas that you have, when we leave this call, start for the fall, go forward? I want you to brainstorm in your groups how we might actually achieve some of these things. Okay, so we needed a little more time. We'll spend about 8 minutes or so in our groups. Does that sound good? We had 5 before, so we'll spend about 8. So use your time equally. All right, Jenna, go ahead. See ya.
Anyone want to start? Does anyone have any ideas right off the bat?
I mean, I guess I can go. I was thinking, I'm working, first of all, I'm Heather, and I'm an ECMH, early childhood mental health consultant, working in preschool programs in Massachusetts. And one thing I was thinking about was just trying to get some things in place prior to the reopening, and talking with teachers about, maybe having them do some trauma professional development during this time now to kind of prepare for the reopening if it's possible. There's one training I'm in the middle of developing for the teachers that I'm working with, so hopefully we'll have time to do that. And then another thing was it's tricky because if we reopen while there's still risk for transmission of the virus, a lot of the things that were stress relieving for the kids before, like the sand tables and things like that, might need to be taken out because of the risk for infection. So trying to find ways that the kids can regulate that don't involve increasing risk, I think would be really important, and maybe having more outside time than they normally would, and making little obstacle courses outside and things like that.
I've also been thinking very hard about how to encourage our teachers in the area to be more trauma informed and educated during this time. I'm a community coordinator, and the majority of my work is educating professionals and educating teachers about trauma-informed care, strength-based practices, sensory integration, social emotional learning, all of those things. So that's kind of my focus right now too. We kind of hit it on the nose there. That's a big concern, and things are going to change, and now is the time to prepare for them, not when we encounter them. Because that's going to create panic, and that's going to create stress, and that's going to create crisis.
I'm Bill. I'm a school psychologist and working seventh through 12th grade, and I think it's just an opportune time to try to, as folks are saying, do some real trauma informed, whether it's direct or refresher work with the staff, because I think one of the things I've been noticing with all this and the staff is even those folks who've had some of this, it's really, really stressful. And I'm seeing, folks are just slipping from good practices that they had. Our schools are still closed and probably won't open until the fall. So I think that reminder that, and again, a gentle, not a rebuking reminder, which is hard to do for me sometimes, because I want to go, wait, we know this, we can do it better. But that idea in terms of that compassionate piece about encouraging that now, that kind of those trauma informed practices that we know are so important.
It looks like there's another person who doesn't have their video or microphone on, if they want to add anything in the chat. Ramona. Or not, that's okay too.
Yeah, my microphone is on now.
Oh, perfect.
When I need to talk, I turn it on. Mine is that my teachers they keep asking me, when are we going to go back to work? When are we going to go back to work? It's like they are bored being home, and they're bored doing this work through the computer, because when you're teaching children, your main focus is dealing with those children, and putting something online for the parents to carry through, it's not working. I mean, because you never, with my teachers, I know that if the parents have older children, their focus is on those older children. I deal with infant and toddlers, so I know that the younger children are getting left out because the homework and stuff for online schooling is so intense for parents, and it's stressful for them. And I think it's making it even more stressful for us, because we know that we're putting out good information and it's just not getting used.
Thank you for sharing, Ramona. Does anybody have anything else to add?
I'll just speak to what Ramona said from a parent's perspective. I don't know if anyone else is also parenting children through this. I have 4 that I'm responsible for right now, between the ages of 15 and 1. But I'm trying to navigate all of this e-learning as well, and it's very, very difficult. There's different platforms for everything. There are there's technical issues. It's almost laughable to expect parents to do what we're asking them to do right now. So we need to be prepared for when school comes back into session, for it to have never been held outside of school. It's that understanding and that recognition that we are going to spend excuse me, at least the first quarter of what hopefully will be a normal year next year, repeating what we should have done this year, at the end of this year. It's like it's the summer catch up times 20.
Yeah.
And an entire generation is going to be affected by this, so it's not like we can't do it universally, it's everybody.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I think the breakout rooms are about to close again.
All right, welcome back as we all start to filter back in. All right, how was that for everyone? Good? Fruitful? I hope so. Hope so. All right. I definitely don't have to start off. I'm happy to, but you needed a little more time, Linda. Okay, thank you. So this is really helpful because we can't see what's going on with you when we're like, as we get put in the breakouts as well. So I just have this fear that I'm leaving people like hanging out in space together, like wanting to come back. So I really appreciate the feedback because we're going to keep using the breakouts. And yeah, it wasn't the same room this time. So again, this is a learning for me and for Jenna too. This is only the first time she's done this. So thank you, Jenna, for taking this on. And we will perfect this as we go forward. But I still hope that the discussions were fruitful. Ours certainly were. Would anyone like to share? All right, Karen. Go for it.
Oh, great. It's so helpful to have people from other places, like in Canada, who are already opening up or about to open up, because it's a reminder, like I'm thinking about, safety and belonging and thinking about like Maslow's hierarchy, and they are thinking about like physiological safety, like, someone has a child that has asthma and they're about to have to go into a school building where it's optional to wear a mask or to maintain distance. And it's like, if we aren't tending first and thinking first about someone's protection of their health, how can they even think about like, how are you doing emotionally? And so that was a good reminder for me. Like when we start going back, even if it's blended or part-time or something like that, like the first things first is health.
So keeping Maslow in mind, right? First things first.
Right.
All right. Yes, Adriana. Let's see. I can unmute you real quick. Hold on. Okay.
Okay. So this is about the New Zealand context again. So we've started, opening up our schools, and the problem is that it comes from the top down, and so the message is a bit complicated. So the schools is arguing with the Ministry of Education, and the parents are confused. So the parents are basically confused. All the parents want to know is all the risk factors and that everything has been sorted so that they can make an informed choice as to send their children to school, so that they know that their child is going to be safe. And then you've got your teachers who are getting messages and they're saying, hey, we can't maintain physical distancing. So then the government has changed the criteria for schools and said, well, you have to have physical distancing of 2 meters outside and 1 meter inside. And then everybody's saying, well, how can you do this? Do you understand teaching that children? What about the early childhood centres? We can't have physical distancing. So there's a lot of confusion going around, and what would really help, is if the teachers had time to work together to understand what needs to be done, so that they're all on the same page and they're all prepared, and that the parents have been informed clearly and they've voiced what their concerns are, so that their concerns are clearly answered. And then the Ministry of Education needs to send out information that's consistent. Everybody has to be consistent, because there's one thing that's bad when you're really stressed out. It's inconsistent messages and messages that keep changing. And so, that's why teachers need to have time to prepare and talk to each other and say, how are we going to deal with all these children with all these stories? How are we going to and trauma-informed would be really great, but in New Zealand we don't have trauma-informed practice. So people aren't thinking about those sort of things. So it's like, all they're thinking about is the logistics and getting the curriculum in. They're not really thinking about, trauma. So, it's just trying to get everybody to get that consistent message and making information accessible, because the information that we're getting is like screes of printout, and there's no pretty infographics, and you're sitting there trying to read the information and then it conflicts, and that's confusing. And for many parents, they don't know what the heck's going on, so they're stressed and they're saying, I'm not sending my kid to school.
Awesome.
That's
Thank you.
it. Yeah.
Thank you.
I hope it
Yes. So again, like, this peer support keeps coming up, and I love this. This came up in our group, and I don't know if anyone else had it come up in their group as like one really practical step of, and again, time for teachers. I mean, that's always, even before this, right? Giving teachers time to be together, to work together, to function collectively together. But how do we create the space and time to plan effectively beforehand, have a consistent message? Someone in my group suggested, so they had the era of administration K-12. Excellent. And if you don't, finding someone who does. So finding an ally who does have the ear of one, so even if it's one person who knows one administrator who's a champion, starting with what you know, figuring out who's the one person you can go to start bringing these things up. If it's not you, you might know someone who does, but really thinking strategically about the webs of connections we already have. And how do we reach administrators who are in control of the planning? And I thought that was really great and practical. And I know school boards came up last time, which we're going to delve into again. What else came up as a really practical way in a group? Anything else you feel like you can put it in chat, or you can put it, Rhonda. Where's Rhonda? Oh, there you are. Hi, Rhonda.
Hey.
Whoops.
I just wanted to say that as a district, I'm the mental health coordinator in our district. We have about 52,000 students. I'm in Georgia, and we've been working with our administration since all of this, actually before it went. We had to set up lesson plans and what we were going to do if we went out. I don't think we thought we were going to be out this long, but now we are. So we've been talking about a lot of things, what you guys are talking about. And I must admit that the people at the district level have been thinking about, what do you do with your children who are compromised health-wise? Are we going to continue to teach them from home? Are we going to do homebound health, with them, with lessons? And I have to say, at the top level too, Georgia State, I'm working with some state people, and we're working on like lessons, because we're going to be under the assumption that no one is trauma informed, that we're going to have to teach them some pieces and give them some scripts and lessons, so that when districts are working this summer, for those people that work year round, are able to push out lessons. So myself with my social workers, we're creating learning paths right now. One's on just basic SEL. We're creating right now a learning pathway on trauma informed, so that everybody's going to have the same language. Because when you're working in 42 buildings, that helps.
Yes.
And just doing some little pieces like that. So we're under the assumption that we're going to give you a whole bunch of resources, so that you have a giant toolbox to take from, whether you're teaching kindergarten or pre-K, or whether you're teaching science at the 10th grade. So those are some of the things that we have been thinking about from the district level.
I love that. Thank you so much. Thank you for sharing. Friends, it's 1 o'clock. How did that happen? Oh, this is wonderful. And yeah, we could just keep going on and on. And I think, I hope that in your small groups, at least, people have some things to think about, ways that they might advocate in your own areas. I think it's going to take all of us. It's going to, in someone in my group said it's going to take a village, it's going to take an army, however you want to think about it, right? And we are all part of that. We're spread out all over the country and in other countries, right? So how do each one of us make a difference? And in trying to move this work forward in as many ways as we can. And that's really one of my goals is to create as many champions as possible so that we reach a tipping point where we don't have to feel like we're screaming into the wind by ourselves anywhere. That's what I want to avoid. So I want to thank you all for coming together every week. I'm going to keep showing up as long as you keep showing up. I love doing this, and I'll have different guests and co-hosts floating in and out as we move forward. And I will, every Monday we set out a blog on ACEs Connection, just to remind you, with the link. And sometimes it's a group blog, like with all of, because we have several of these discussions every week. So sometimes the very first one on Monday has all of them in one. It's the same registration link that we used for this one each week. So ours doesn't change because we keep meeting. And I will announce the topic and any special guests that I have on Monday. And feel free to, let me put in the chat really quick. My Twitter is at Lara Kain 1. And my email is lkain@acesconnection. If you want me to focus on a certain topic in the next couple weeks, chime in. I mean, I've been building these based on our conversations, but feel free to suggest something that we dive into next. I'm totally open to ideas of how, and just with that focus on the future, right? Like, what do we want to change and how are we going to change it based on our experience? And join ACEs Connection, join the ACEs in Education page if you're not already a member. And that's where we post the blogs every week. Other than that, Jenna, any last things that I forgot?
No, that's it. Thank you everyone for coming.
Yes. So thank you, and I will see you all next Thursday, and be well, be safe, take care of yourself and your families in the meantime, okay? Bye, everyone.